Welcome back to In Her Wallet, a weekly podcast helping women around the world take control of their finances for good and build better financial futures one episode at a time. My name is Sophia. I am the host of In Her Wallet, the founder, and also an accredited investment representative here in Canada. I am very excited to be bringing you a new episode of In Her Wallet. Today, we are chatting about women and our confidence when it comes to investing, a subject I am very passionate about. It is a well known fact that the gender pay gap is real. On average, every woman earns just 85 cents of every dollar a man earns. But what is not really talked about is the gender wealth gap. Did you know that every woman, on average, earns just one third of the wealth of a single man? These numbers are crazy, and one thing we can do to get closer to reaching that equality when it comes to wealth is to start investing. I understand that with everything new that we put our hands on, we might feel anxious and worried and overwhelmed, especially if it's our own money on the line. So, how do you really invest with confidence and stay invested for the long term over the years? To have that conversation, I have an amazing guest joining us today, Simran Kang, who is the leader in the North American family office space. She has a decade of experience advising ultra high net worth families with their family owned enterprises at PwC, where she was a trusted advisor to many prominent families over the years. Today, Simran is the co-founder of MyFO, My Family Office, a fintech platform that makes family office management accessible to everyone and not just the ultra high net worth families of this world. Simran, I am so excited to have this conversation with you. Welcome to In Her Wallet.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
I know, me too. Why don't we start with an icebreaker so the In Her Wallet community can get to know you a little bit better? That's something I do with every guest, and usually we get to learn something fun and interesting from about the guest from this. What's your go-to coffee order?
I actually don't drink coffee. If I do, it's a decaf. I stopped drinking coffee about 7 months ago, and it's actually been quite incredible. It helps with your sleep. So, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe I should try that. Okay.
It's
What's the
not
movie that?
easy. Yeah.
What's that?
I said it's not easy giving it up.
No.
Yeah.
I bet. I mean, I can. I don't know how I'll be able to do that, but I'll try at least. What's the movie that you can rewatch again and again?
Uh, this is going to sound super cheesy, but it's probably either The Devil Wears Prada or Mean Girls.
You are my girl. Devil Wears Prada. I know every single line of that movie. I
Yeah.
love it. And finally, where would you go right now if you could travel anywhere in the world today?
Honestly, it's not even that exotic. I just want to go lie on a beach at Mexico. That's it. It's like it's been raining nonstop in Vancouver, so I'm like, yes, please get me out of here.
Fair enough. I'm
Yeah.
with you on that. Yes. Okay, well, with that out of the way, why don't we start with an intro about you? Can you tell us, for those folks who don't know who you are and what you're building right now, what your career has been prior to starting your own fintech startup and what you're building right now?
I'm actually an accountant by training, and I started my career at PwC, which is a big four accounting firm. And the last few years of my career, I spent it in the family office space, working with a number of family offices, helping them with everything from family governance to succession planning to investment management. And it was truly kind of like the beginning of when people started talking about intergenerational wealth or generational wealth. And so that's where I started my career. I left around 2017 or 2018. And then I had started actually a multifamily office first. So it was we had like a consulting practice where we had psychologists work with families and develop succession plans. We did fund of funds on the investment side, and we also had an estate planning team. And that's where I really realized that we needed some technology to scale our service offering because it was really expensive. Like you were spending on average $500 to $1,000 an hour for our services, and it just wasn't attainable for most people. And so that's when one of my co-founders and I decided to break off and create a tech platform. And so that's where we started My Family Office. And it's really designed to manage the end to end process of managing a family office. And because it's a digital platform, we're able to democratize that access so that the average person can use this platform. And so we use machine learning and AI to develop your profile as who you are. Are you an investor? Are you inheriting money? Are you a high income earner? Maybe you're a professional that's incorporated, or you're starting a business, or you're exiting a business. And we can tailor your experience based on who you are and provide you with guidance along the way to make sure you're optimizing not only from how you manage your money, but do you have the right documents in place? Do you have the right estate plan in place? And are you bringing all your people to the table and communicating with them effectively?
Very useful tool coming from someone who has worked in the industry. I see a lot of value in that. Simran, can we highlight briefly for those ladies in the audience who might not be familiar with the terms estate planning and family office? Can you give us a breakdown of what that is so the audience can understand that better?
Sure. So a family office is generally a family that has a net worth of 500 million or more. So they usually have a staff of people managing their money, people, and documents. So they'll have like a CIO who does their investment management. They'll have a CFO that does all the reporting. They'll have, assistants and executive management that helps them manage people, meetings, when things need to get signed and everything. And so estate planning is a component of that gets layered on top. And what estate planning is where people, you've probably heard the term trust fund babies. So that's where people decide whether or not they need a trust. What are the benefits of a trust or setting up a holding company? And that's where you're planning for your estate. And so often those estate plans, you're planning for retirement, or you actually even plan for death, right? So what kind of insurance do you have? How do those insurance vehicles help you manage tax liability? And then how do you actually like transition your wealth to the next generation in an effective manner? So that's where estate planning comes into play. And that's why you often hear of these like billionaires paying like 0% tax or no tax or inheriting money without paying tax. And that's the knowledge that I think needs to be shared. So it's like at least we're all on an equal playing field.
Exactly. I agree with you. Thank you for giving us a bit of an explanation there. Clearly, Simran knows a thing or two about investing and investing for the long term. So today, and you work with high profile families, large net worth. As you mentioned today, our conversation will be structured around how to apply that knowledge to women who are just starting to invest and who might be lacking confidence to start. So why don't we start with really talking about why women invest less? There is numerous research that says that unfortunately women invest significantly less than men. Simran, why do you think that is?
I think a lot of it comes from, so when you do read some of that research, like a lot of it comes from habits we've learned from our parents. So oftentimes what happened in the past, like, so what's interesting is though women don't invest, but they're remarkable at setting budgets, managing a family wallet, and saving. And generally, in a lot of families, what happened is it was the patriarch that was doing the investment decisions. And so it hasn't like passed down generationally, like that investing habit of making the decision of where they invest. But generally women do manage a lot of a family wallet, right? When it comes to where's the spend and how are we saving?
What do you think are some of those social biases that maybe you could highlight based on your own example that you had to break away from in your childhood and building a career at PwC and starting your own fintech startup and building that? I mean, you are playing in a male field, I think, right? Male dominated field. What are some of the things that you had to break away from?
I think I was really fortunate that I had a grandfather that when I was really young, he would take me to, like, he was investing in land and making decisions, and he would take me to make those decisions, and he would introduce me to people that he knew. And my father did the same thing. And so I always knew, and part of it was because they were immigrants, and I was, my dad didn't have a son. So it was like the oldest daughter had to help make all those decisions. And so I was like forced to kind of take on a role that typically a boy would. And so I think because of that, I ended up developing relationships with people that I trusted to help manage money. And I started to understand those things at quite a young age. And so I think one of the struggles with women is we probably tend to trust women more than we maybe trust our male counterparts. And so, and if you don't have a relationship that's been passed down to you of an investment manager that you trust, and that, there's been that succession planning, you don't really know who to give your money to and who to trust them. And generally, women are a little bit more cautious, which makes them better investors, but they're a little bit more cautious in terms of who they trust with their money when it comes to investing.
Yes. What do you think women can do to break away from the social biases of patriarchy and, you know, not really, maybe women coming from families where investing wasn't taught or wasn't a norm? What do you think these women can do to really get on the right path to building that financial success and wealth?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes from like building their financial confidence, and that's like coming from building financial acumen. So, it is like listening to podcasts like this, building that network. There's lots of different cohorts that I hear about that are teaching women about venture investing, private equity, public markets, things like that. So it's like build your financial acumen and then start flexing the muscle, right? And like understand risk. And so as you're investing, it's like, okay, what are my risk parameters and where am I going to start? And you can always start small. Like you can start with a local advisor, a local bank. It can be as simple as a, GIC, which is guaranteed, but you're at least getting a return. And so you can start there and then start to, you're like, actually, I'm looking for a better return and I'm willing to take more risk. You can start to flex that muscle, and the stronger it gets, the more confident you get and the more you tend to invest.
Taking small steps and leveling up every quarter or every year. Once you start feeling comfortable on that level, get onto the next one. I really like that approach. I am also a big believer that small steps lead to big results, so I like how you broke that down. I want to go back to Simran, what you said, that women in general are really good at managing families' budgets, administrative expenses, planning things. But it's not enough, I think, only saving and budgeting to really build wealth. Investing is a very big part of that. So, can we highlight from your experience working with high net worth families? Why is it important for women to not only save and budget, but also invest for the long term?
Well, there's a lot of news these days about inflation. Like we hadn't really been hearing about it before. But what happens with money in especially high inflation environments is if you're not investing it, your savings are actually worth less in the long term. So, say for example, if in the next year inflation is up to 7%, your money that you save today is actually worth 7% less in a year than it is today. And so if
Mhm.
and generally some of the like really risk adverse investments, so like say a guaranteed investment account like a GIC, it's just keeping up with inflation, right? And so, and then there's the idea of like investing and building your wealth. And that's where like it's important to want to do that as well, because you do need a retirement savings plan. And just saving is not going to be sufficient. You need to invest it so it grows. And then also having financial freedom. So saving is really difficult in times like this when things are more expensive. And if you're not investing it, you generally don't have enough money for a time that maybe you just want to go on a vacation, Or, I just had like a water leak happen in our condo, and it's like, okay, you look at the bill and you're like, oh wow, it's like a few $1,000s
No.
to fix this. So those things you need to be able to plan for, and you need to have sufficient capital to be able to manage those things. And investing makes that easier because your money is working for you.
Exactly. That's what we all, I think, want to achieve one day, to have our money work for us as hard as we work for
Yeah.
it. You actually brought up a very good point. It's not good to be investing money that you might need immediately, because one of the worst things I think in investing is to have to sell your investments and to pull out at a bad time. So, how can women balance those immediate savings that they need to have for emergencies like a leak that you just mentioned, and also investing for the long term?
You always have to do both simultaneously, and if your investments even become big enough, and one day you do have to sell them for something, like, it generally doesn't become that big of a deal, right? Because you can absorb any like tax payments that you have to do as well. So you need to have both, but really the important part is that you're understanding the difference between the two, and that you're exercising both of them, because really what the investing side does is it's creating passive income. And that's a really important thing, because there's only so far we get with our careers and working more, and we're already making 75 cents on the dollar and struggling to get the promotions. So at least if our money is in the market doesn't know if you put money in as a woman or a man. It's still, and generally women actually are better investors than men, so we'll probably be beating them on that side.
Yes.
So that's always working for you. So you want to have both, and then you have to understand that if you do need to pull it out in an emergency, there's something called the gain, which is your money's working for you. And so maybe you put in $1 today, it's worth $2 um, in a year, and so that gain of that $1 is taxable. So if you need to actually pull out from your investment, say $3,000, maybe half of that is taxable, and you have to deal with the tax
Mhm.
consequences of that.
Yes, I want to highlight here the benefit of tax-free savings plan, where which actually shields you from paying taxes on your investments. That's just a little tip from me for those women who might not know what a TFSA is. Look into that. So, Simran, you did mention that women are actually better investors than men, and there is a lot of research that suggests that. And considering that today we're talking about women and our confidence when it comes to investing, why do you think we as women are better investors than men?
Generally, what I've seen, and I saw this with families I worked with as well, like when it came to reviewing financial statements of even the family business, is I saw a lot of women ask curious questions, because generally I found men are very confident when it comes to finance. So oftentimes they don't ask the important questions because they're afraid of looking stupid. And generally, women are like, oh, I actually don't know about this space, and I'm not expected to know about this space. So I'm going to ask all the questions I need to ask to feel confident. And as long as they're given that space to ask that, they ask very thorough questions. And because they are working on the budget and saving, they also understand how hard it is to save that money they're about to invest. And so they do a lot of deep due diligence. I've had women I've invested with, women I've helped invest, and women that have invested in my company. And generally, they ask very thorough questions, right? Like, they don't have that kind of confidence or arrogance, maybe, that some men do, and that risk tolerance. Really, it's like generally men will just like take the risk, and they're like, I'll just see what happens. And so women will tend to be a lot more thorough. So that's just kind of like some of the stuff that I've seen, and in my time.
Due diligence, 100%, I think, is one of the advantages that we as women possess and have when it comes to investing and asking questions. So, for those ladies who are just starting to invest and who might be afraid to ask questions because it might look silly or make them look like they don't really know much about the subject, I want to say that Look at it as your advantage, as you doing that thorough research that will pay off down the road, and never be afraid to ask questions. And actually, I think the news that came out this week
Yeah,
about
I was just
Taylor
thinking that.
Swift, right? That was asking FTX platform founder, oh, are this securities unregistered? So don't be afraid to ask questions. That's basically the conclusion,
Mhm.
right? What do you think might be another reason why women are better investors than men besides the due diligence?
I think we women are also investing in spaces that men don't typically invest in. So you see women, we see a lot of women that invest in other female founders, and a lot of female founders are building technology or consumer products that address the female market. So there's been 50% of the market that's been untapped. So there's a ton of alpha just sitting there, right, that they get to tap into. And generally, female businesses are also undervalued, and so they get to carry
Mhm.
that alpha. So alpha is basically just like in finance is like the gain that's left to be made. So and so there and so
Yes.
that's like what I think really ends up happening is because you're as a female, you have a perspective that generally men don't. Like they don't understand like period products or maybe skincare
Hmm.
and beauty or you know
Beauty
yeah,
devices.
or
Yeah.
like fitness, like that's designed for us. Like they don't understand that space, whereas women do because they're like, oh, actually, I would use that. Like there's been things I've invested in because I'm like, I would use that. I'm a consumer, so I'm gonna invest in that, and so
Yes.
that provides a really healthy perspective because it's this whole market that's totally untapped.
90% of women in their families are main decision makers when it comes to buying things for home. So that's going back to what you just said, right? Investing in industries that men generally would not, but we as women understand that these products are needed and will be desired. Let's go back to investing and saving, Simran. How to know for a woman if you're saving and investing enough money? Because you've worked in PwC and you have the My Family Office startup right now company, financial plan obviously is at the crux of all of it. So how do you know if you are saving and investing enough money?
I mean, I think that's really a question for a financial advisor. Like, I don't really do financial plans, but I think the most important thing is actually talking to that person. Like, who is that trusted person that that you can talk to? Because it can vary very differently for different people, right? Like, do you have money that you're going to inherit from your parents? Do you have help? Like, are there other things that maybe you have in your life and that can change your savings plan? um, and and any dependencies. But like there's a lot of studies out there and information out there that tell you how much you should be saving and building a retirement plan. Like I want to retire at this age, and they always say you want to have 1 to 3 months worth of income in your savings plan, right? So so if you do have a rainy day, you generally have like kind of a savvier saver will have about 3 months of income in their savings account, and then you're investing for what your retirement goals are, right? So I want to retire at 60 and I want to be able to spend $100,000 a year, you know and so what does that look like? And if I estimate that I'm going to live till 95, how much money does that need to be? And so those are some of the things you just need to think about is, again, separating what savings is versus investing, and then like understanding what those goals are with your financial advisor and what you need to do to achieve those.
I agree with you, Simran. How should women in their 20s and 30s be making these investment decisions when they might have a lot on their plate? Paying off student loans, purchasing first property as their home, investing for retirement, traveling. How do you juggle all of these things at the same time?
Yeah, it's funny. I have a little sister who is like kind of going through all that right now. Like she recently graduated from school, so she's got student debt, and then she's like, "Do I do my TFSA? Do I do my RRSP, or do I invest my money?" So generally, there's a lot of factors that impact what you're going to implement to as your strategy, right? And so, like right now, you're in a rising interest rate market. So if you've got student debt, you in the past it was maybe better to save because you were and invest because you were borrowing at such a low rate. But now it might be better for you to pay off your debt and then focus on investing and saving in the future, right? Again, housing used to be easier and more attainable, and it depends on what city you're in, right? Like mortgage rates have gone through the roof, so it might not be the right time for you to buy a property. It's still a little bit volatile out there. People don't really know when it's going to stabilize. So there's a lot of factors. And again, you kind of have to sit with somebody to understand, like, hey, what are my risks that I'm dealing with? And you just have to be careful because generally, if you go to a institution, like I actually tell people to talk to their accountant because their accountant doesn't actually get paid based on what decision you make, whereas you go to an institution or a bank, they're like, I want you to keep your interest bearing loan because I'm making money off the interest. But then I also want you to invest because I'm
Yes.
making money on the investment. So I remember, like, even when my sister went, like, she came out with like a GIC that was giving her a lower return than the interest on her loan. And I was like, that's not what you want to do because you're actually losing money. And the only person making money on this is the bank. So I was like, you don't need that. You should pay this off. And then you're making, just start saving monthly. So those are some of the things that you have to kind of like balance. And it depends on the current economic situation as well.
I really like the example that you just highlighted with your sister. So, does she have a finance background or
No, she
accounting?
doesn't.
So, she's
No,
a
I
perfect
have, yeah,
example actually of someone I want to look at.
yeah.
What's your advice to your sister who might have lack of knowledge, might not really know how to navigate that space, and be afraid to make mistakes like getting a GIC that pays less return than what the interest she pays on her loan? How do you help her navigate that? What's your advice to your own sister?
Yeah, so I definitely told her to go back to the bank and say, "You sold me something I shouldn't have had. It doesn't make sense for with what I'm trying to achieve." So she went back, and because there's like usually a few day period where you can go back to them, and if you're aggressive enough, the banks will undo what they did, even though it's a guaranteed investment account, and so you're locked up. But it didn't meet her objectives. So she went back to them and she said, "You have to undo what you did. And I'm actually moving this money from the GIC to pay my loan off." Right. So that
Hmm.
was my advice to her. And I know that's difficult to replicate because I can't tell each person what to do. So it wasn't really one of those teaching moments. It was like one of those telling moments, like, oh no, this is what you have to do and this is why. And so that's like where I think it's really important to like ask the questions that you might feel like, hey, maybe this isn't like a smart question, but ask the questions and don't ever feel pressured to make a decision in the moment. Like any deal that is there today. So this is kind of my advice, and it was advice I got with a partner that I used to work with, and this was advice that he would give to all his families. He's like, investments are always going to be there, right? There is no such thing as this like golden ticket investment that you're somehow going to miss, and it's like, oh, this is going to be the next Facebook. Like those things are always happening, and those deals are always coming. So don't ever feel pressured to make a decision when it comes to an investment. And so take the time to really understand what are my costs and what are my benefits from this.
You started talking about the time, and I want to talk about this phrase: time in the market is more important than timing the market. Why do you think the period of time that you stay invested is very important for us as women who have a much longer life expectancy than men?
I think this applies generally to men and women is it's you always want to invest for 20 to 30 to 40 years from now. Like whether you're buying real estate, so when you're buying a real estate asset, I say to everyone, I'm like, don't buy something that you're going to grow out of in a year or 2 years, because that's when market volatility hits you. Buy something or invest in something that you're like, I can hold this for 15, 20 years, because over time, the market will fluctuate. You will have periods where the market goes down and it comes back up, and you're not desperate to sell it, right? And that's the same with stocks. Like, you might enter the market today, like none of us can really predict what's going to happen exactly tomorrow or in a few days. There's general ideas of like what's going to happen with the market. But if you ever look at the market, like if you look at the TSX or the New York Stock Exchange or anything, over time they go up and down, but on average they go up, right? So if you invest $1 today, it can go down to 50 cents tomorrow, but in 20 years that dollar is probably going to be worth, $2 to $3, right? Yeah. But there will be times where you're like, oh my god, my investments have gone up and they've gone down, and that volatility is always there. What you don't want is to invest for 6 months and you're like, I'm going to invest this $10,000 and I need it in 6 months, and I'm just going to throw it in some volatile stock. Like, that's where you should just do a GIC because it's guaranteed, right? But if you put it into the market, you don't really know what the market's going to look like in 6 months. So, because on average the market's done 5% or 6%, and it doesn't necessarily mean that's what you're going to experience. So, the length of time reduces your risk overall.
I really like how you highlighted the importance of remembering that whatever you buy, you should be willing and ready to hold it for a prolonged period of time. I think, especially within the past 12 months, the markets and the economy has seen a lot of volatility. We are experiencing inflation. There is a lot of negative talk out there, and a lot of people, especially new investors, beginner investors, might feel overwhelmed and anxious as to, what's going to happen to my money. But I think if you go into it at the beginning, knowing that, I'm going to hold this for 5, 10, 15 years, so this volatility doesn't really affect me, I think this is a healthy way to approach investing if you're new to it. Simran, to wrap up our conversation, I want to ask you, you did start our talk with saying that a lot of the high net worth families that you work with, some of them might be paying very little tax, and there are different strategies that they're using. Do you think you can share any of these that might apply to women who might not be at a $500 million net worth range,
Yeah.
but who are just starting to build their wealth? What are some of the tips and tricks you can share with us to be really efficient with your money?
I think a lot of it is stuff that you kind of highlighted as well. Like, understand what a TFSA is, know what an RRSP is, start saving and investing. And then when it comes to investing, when you are investing, make sure you're doing it in a tax effective manner. So, like, if you are finding that you're saving quite a bit of money and you're starting to buy investments that might not just be public equities, you might want to look at things like holding companies and structures like that help you. And then eventually looking at trusts. A lot of families nowadays, like, trusts can actually be very beneficial. Um, and then the other thing is, if you're starting a business, make sure you talk to an accountant, because you just want to understand, because a lot of people will start a business, they don't understand the benefits of incorporating. That can have legal and tax benefits. And then also using holding companies to hold your investments or trusts, and things like that. Like, there are things like lifetime capital gains exemptions you can trigger. So there's a lot of stuff out there. So especially if you're a startup founder and you're starting a business, just make sure you find an accountant that you can talk to about your personal situation and how you're structuring it, because it seems like these days everybody's doing a side hustle, and so they should have the right structure in place, because I want so many of them to take off and do really, really well. And so and they
Yeah.
should be prepared for that exit event.
Mm-hmm. Simran, thank you so much for highlighting different angles that a person can look at all of this. To wrap up our conversation, I have two questions for you that I ask every guest. And the first one is, what does financial freedom mean to you?
Um, yeah, that's a tough one. I think financial freedom is the ability to do what you really want to do with your life, and then also just to not be stressed about money.
What's your advice to women who want to achieve financial freedom?
Oh, I don't know if I should be giving advice on that. I'm still working on it. So one thing
Go
that
ahead.
I always do and I tell everyone to do is always have that, like, at least have that savings. Like, even if you're not ready to invest, just make sure you have that savings available. And then slowly start dipping your toe in investing. But as long as you have that savings, if you go through a bad breakup or you need to restart your life, you have something that you gives you the financial freedom to not be stuck in a situation. And so I think that's like the bare minimum of financial freedom, is to not be stuck and be able to make those decisions. And then eventually the idea is to, save and invest enough that you are just doing what you love and enjoy doing and have passive income, right? And then you're working for fun.
Thank you for sharing that, Simran. It was such a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience and your path. I think this episode will definitely be well received. If anyone from the In Her Wallet community wants to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
The best way is probably if you just go to the myfo.tech website, and then if you sign up to contact us, if they say that they heard me on the podcast, I will make sure my team highlights it and gets me connected to them.
Well, that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode and found the tips I shared useful and helpful. As always, I want you to give yourself credit for showing up for yourself and your future, because every time you do that, you increase what's financially possible for you. I thank you all for your time and look forward to seeing you next week.